What do you do when faced with idolatry? That is the question. And the NSA ad says that you should hoist the Jolly Roger and you should be ready with Johnny Cash's favorite finger or something close to that.
Just qualifier there. It says you should be willing to.
Willing to. Only be willing. And I thought it was interesting that, you're not out even chasing down idolatry. You're not even going out and trying to find the strongholds and tear them down. You were actually faced with idolatry. You're in the passive position. It popped up in front of you. What should you do? Well, you should give it 20% of a wave, is what the NSA ad said to do, and that has caused quite a lot of controversy, so we thought it would be good for us to talk about this. I was thinking today, if there were any little boy that were mouthing off, we would say something like, "Hey, you kiss your mama with that mouth?" That's where I grew up. That was what you did. And I imagine people want to say, "Hey, NSA, would you salute Jesus with that hand?" And I imagine that our position would be that, yes, the same hand with which we flick the bird to idolatry is the same hand with which we turn and salute Jesus. Wow. So if that indeed is the case, we should get into why it is the case. But before getting into the deep end, why did we even do this ad? What was the ad actually about? Why this ad and why now?
Yeah, so the beginning of this one came with a bit of a conversation between Nate and myself. I was suggesting the Shackleton ad,
Yep.
I believe, late 19th century ad that runs in a British newspaper, describing a challenge in the most hopeless of ways. And yet doing so in such a way that it evokes a certain response from a very, very certain subclass of men. That is, men who are drawn to adventure and for whom adversity is actually it invigorates them and gets them excited. And I think that is there's something really powerful about that. And I did Cross Politic yesterday and was talking about how I remember a Marine Corps recruiting poster I saw that said, two things, our expectations, your abilities, guess which one will change. And I remember as a young man seeing that and just being so compelled by that just called me. I wanted that. But what was weird was showing that same ad to other people and watching a positive revulsion, actually offended at the ad because of there was a machismo to it or something that just put them off. And I realized what an effective recruitment strategy that was for the Marine Corps and for Shackleton, where right there you've eliminated a whole bunch of people that you don't want to have come.
It's not just an attractive ad,
Yeah.
It's a filter.
Yeah, it is a filter. And I do think that that's something that the NSA marketing has done well for us, has been. There is a certain squeamishness that has not been helpful for the church that I think we need, we don't want that in leadership. There's a certain kind of just raw machismo that I think we actually want to be actively recruiting. Now, you don't want to leave it as raw machismo. You want to give it an education. You want to grow it up and mature it. You want it to glorify God. But there's a raw material that we're looking for, and I think that that's what when Nate and I were talking, that's what I was looking for, I think was delivered.
Yep.
Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting when you advertise, and especially in a format like this where you are saying wanted. What do we want? What are we advertising for? We have a need, and we are looking for a particular kind of man. And then we get this outrage from a bunch of people who are not those particular kinds of men. And what they've done is they've immediately self-selected themselves out quickly as the kind of people who will fold on the battlefield.
And they've augmented the ad.
Yeah, and that's the best part of it, is we're sitting here talking about an ad because thousands of other people were talking about the ad. The ad's effectiveness is in appeal to the right kind of young man that the college would like to recruit, deterrent for the kind of person that we don't want to be on the battlefield with, and then also try to platform and create the conversation that pushes the message as far as possible. So we had a very short little wanted ad, and it could have just run on a little feed and reached people that already knew about us. And instead, the people who hate us the most have incited by that finger first, and then by the other layers of the onion that they discovered thereafter, have spread the word. They've spread it, to the far reaches.
To hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, millions at this point. And it's like, it just in terms of how far that's gone now is fantastic. And I could say to every single critic, you don't have to want young men who are willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger when faced with idolatry. You don't have to want that. We want that. You know those guys? You know guys like that? I know they're problems for you. I know there are problems.
We'll take them out of your church.
Send them out here.
We'll take them out of your church.
Send them out here.
We'll get them out of your hair.
If we are if the college is trying to be a bull riders school, if that's what we're trying to be, you want the kind of guys who see a killer bull and think, I wonder how long I could stay on that thing hanging on with just one hand. Like, how long could I do this? You want that kind of personality. And when we did this, like those guys are not common. And how many do we need? And we want like 75 a class, ideally. We don't need a ton, but we do need to go find these guys. These guys are gems. They're the potential they have, the potential they have to come here, be trained, and contribute to what the entire mission is here is enormous. And trying to spread that word is what I was tasked with this ad, and Ben wanting the Shackleton ad. And so what we need in those things in an ad, we need points of conversation. We need every, I don't want to be too insulting, but I would say every little content creator. Because the thing is, all these people on Twitter and social media, they all have the psychology of content creators now. They all have to have a show. They all have to put on their show. They have to feed their people. And so we were giving them something to react to engage with, to hate, to love, to fight about, and knowing that fire would spread and we'd get the word out for the kind of guys we want. So that's how it worked. People are doing reaction videos. People are preaching at us. People are preaching at us. Why? Because they have 200 followers, 1,000 followers, 2,000 followers that they want to provide content for. And we gave them the topic of their show for a number of days in a row. Every man in their reach who's attracted to the idea of riding a bull is going to get the word. And so it's a wild success, and the attack is part of that success. It'd be a complete failure of an ad if it didn't draw fire and resistance, because we need it to go out, and we need it to be this kind of picture of masculinity and of aggression and faithfulness that is off-putting to most of the parts of Christendom that are currently the problem. So it needs to be off-putting to that whole slice, because we need 75 bull riders.
So I'd like to throw in one observation that I've made about this. I'm not exactly sure why I'm here, except in the role.
You get blamed for everything.
Except in the role of innocent bystander for the most part.
You raised me and introduced me to Johnny Cash.
I did actually. So I am curious. Last night on Cross Politic, I said I don't think Doug actually saw this ad until it came out.
No, I saw a rough cut.
Okay, there
I saw a rough cut of it, and I thought, huh. And then, and I didn't have it didn't rise to the top of my pile. And then it went out, and I thought, okay, the other guys will take care of it. So that's why I say somewhat of an innocent bystander. I was okay with the.
You raised me and introduced me to Johnny Cash, so not entirely innocent.
And I have a God bless Johnny Cash bumper sticker on my truck. So there you go. But having enthusiastically been in favor of everything that's, not in favor of everything that's happening, but going meta, seeing the whole situation. There's some things about this controversy that absolutely delight me. And one of them is, it's not just that we drew the ire or the conflict of people that oppose us, and that's good for marketing, but there was something about the opposition that just, this kind of unreflective behavior delights me. And that is, where do our critics on this point, where do our critics agree with us, right? And where we agree is we both believe that it is perfectly acceptable to use an image like that in order to go after your adversaries.
In order to make a point.
In order to make a point, in order to go after your adversaries. Now, we thought the adversary was the blasphemy of the opening ceremony at the Olympics, That was our adversary.
That was our sample idolatry. Yeah.
Our sample idolatry. So we thought this image would be appropriate to refer to, somewhat obliquely, which I'll get to in a minute, to go after that blasphemous idolatry. A bunch of the people who are coming after us are using the same image.
Yeah.
They're using the same image
To criticize their enemies.
to criticize their adversary, which is Christians attacking blasphemy. So the Christians who are attacking blasphemy are the ones that you can use that image on. You can't use that image on the opening ceremony of the Olympics because that's a real idol that might shoot back.
NSA doesn't get to tweet it. They get to tweet it
They get,
at
yes,
NSA, but NSA doesn't get to tweet it at
at anybody.
debauchery.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think, well, wait, and here's the other thing: is in the ad, this was a videographer's method of communicating something without putting it in big block letters. And so if someone cussed me out on the street or I got flipped off on the street, I wouldn't write about it by saying by giving the full text of everything. We use circumlocutions. We say he used the F word on me, or he flipped me the bird, or it was the old Beetle Bailey cartoons with all the symbols, and
Yeah.
that's how you indicate cussing.
All the wingdings.
And then in this ad, it got to hoist the Jolly Roger and be willing to use Johnny Cash's favorite finger. And there was a photo of Johnny Cash's face and the very top of this finger.
Yep.
Right. And then it zoomed out for a nanosecond with the full photo. So that was the videographers, the editors.
I would actually even say that was me. That was directorial.
Right.
So initially, it was just a photo of Johnny Cash flipping off the camera and a slow crawl on the photo for the entire line. And so I actually went in and directed the editor to come in tight on the face and hold and then pop out. And then when I saw that cut, I was like, okay, let's actually hold on the face even tighter. I just even tighter, pop out faster, and then on, just like boom, boom, and we're out, like just quickly.
Yeah.
So this was not the accidental edit.
Right.
This was very consciously edited this way. And it's kind of like when I had Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl dropped by Lifeway bookstores.
Right.
And Thomas Nelson was begging me to remove the word shitstorm.
Right.
Like, because they just want that, removed. And I told them, actually, I was like, you know what? I don't care if you black it out and redact my book for them and do a Lifeway edition, but I'm not changing that. This is the word I settled on. This is the right word for this moment and in this context, and I'm not going to back off of that in order to make some more money.
Right.
In this case, I wanted this shot to be as much of an ignition as it needed to be, which it is, but not
More than it needed.
not gratuitous. And so we pushed to have it be communicative, but not gratuitous.
Right.
And I needed it to scatter the pigeons, but we didn't want to just hang around in it.
News flash. It did. So if I'm writing something and I use F and then 3 asterisks, everybody knows what I'm doing. And I like the fact that we use circumlocutions like that because we're opposed to the degradation of culture and discourse and language and stuff. We don't think you ought to be gratuitous and throw F-bombs around because of some purported liberty in Christ. So so that is what was done deliberately to refer to this attitude. And by referring right prior to that to hoist the Jolly Roger, we didn't want our people to come and start raiding Caribbean towns and seizing the women.
We're
and the
not
gold.
actually landing on Normandy Beach either. It's like the whole thing. They're not actually dwelling among the tombs of the long dead. I'm using that metaphorically for these book covers that flicker by and these great thinkers. They're not literally living in a graveyard. Like this, there's all this poetry and metaphors.
Going
through it.
Amelia Bedelia in the response to it all is not an argument, and it's just kind of silly.
So, but then, having said all this, with all this craft and deliberation and okay, let's refer to this mentality. Let's do it delicately. It's like mom is having her tea and Bible study, and her third grade boy comes in, barreling in from the backyard, saying, "Mom, Billy next door used the rhymes with duck word," and he starts announcing in a loud voice to his mother, and that was ungodly, wasn't it, Mother? He said this. And she's
Over and over.
And I told him to go home right now. And, because he said,
I told him to F off.
and so you think, okay, all the other ladies see the glint in his eye because he's getting a chance to be the bad boy by attacking the bad boy for being a bad boy. And so the people, and we've used this illustration before. I've been writing for decades, and occasionally, I'm a cook, so occasionally I put a jalapeno in the cooking, right? Mm-hmm. And I do
One part per million.
A part per million. And then certain critics comb through all that writing. They pull out the jalapenos, puree the thing, and put all of it on one Ritz cracker.
A little list that may have been circulated this past year.
Yes. And then, but I tell you, if you eat all of those jalapenos on one cracker, the effect is entirely different.
Yes.
So basically, I think I don't think it's too strong to say a lot of these critics who are in high dudgeon about this, who are circulating the image themselves, are hypocrites.
Well, they went through and froze it, just that image.
That's right.
And then started sharing it.
So there was that nanosecond on the video, which was frozen and snipped, and then that part of it is circulated, and we're accused of doing that when we're not the ones who did that.
Which is a thing that, this is a thing that people do a lot. You strip the context away. If you strip away context, is it okay to use the middle finger? Well, to who? For what? In what context?
Is it okay to be naked with a woman?
Is it okay is it okay to drink a beer? Is it okay
Any
to
woman.
dance? Is it okay, right? No, and so I actually joked with somebody. This is I said the Manichees were obviously right. Evil has always existed in the world, and that evil is man's middle finger. right? It's a very.
And on the last day, God will say, I gave you that middle finger. What did you use it for?
There you go.
Did you get a return on
Exactly. I said, resist the devil, but only use 4 fingers, right? No, and if anybody's interested in the Manichees, I teach Augustine, City of God, to the freshmen at NSA, and they learn all about Manichaeism and dualism and the nature of Augustine saying evil is a privation, it's a lack, and that will help you to understand that God has given you these tools to be used appropriately. Now, some of our interlocutors might say, okay, we're with you, we get what you're saying, we're not Manichees, we're with Augustine, but we just think you did it wrong. And I would say, well, that's good, and that's a different conversation than what most people are doing.
It's a tactical conversation.
Yeah, it's a tactical conversation. Most people are spazzing out because they've stripped away context, and they just think if you ever do that, that period is a wicked act. Related to this, you mentioned the ad being a success. It's a roaring success. And for the reason you mentioned of getting
like some of its predecessors. That had created the same firestorm in different ways.
Yes, indeed. But I was looking at Galatians today. And Galatians says to crucify my flesh. Okay? The New Testament also tells us, the ad said, when confronted with idolatry. Okay? This is what you must be ready to do. Okay? I'm supposed to crucify my flesh. New Testament tells me that covetousness is idolatry. Where does covetous come from? It comes from my flesh. Like, don't say God is tempting you. You're tempted when you're led away by your own evil desires. What do I want the boys at NSA to do? And what would I tell them to do? You must crucify your flesh. Like, kill it. You don't hate it enough. You really don't hate it enough. You might hate it out there in somebody else or just societally. Like, do you hate your own evil impulses when you are confronted with idolatry? So I'm going to tell them to crucify. Now, what's involved in crucifixion? Okay, so your idolatrous flesh, I want you to chain it up. I want you to strip it down naked to shame it. I want you to beat it with whips. I want you to drive spikes through it. I want you to hang it out in public so everyone can see it. I want you to spit on it. And I want you to break its legs so that it dies on the cross. But whatever you do,
in total humiliation,
whatever you do, don't flick the bird at it.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, that's a bridge too far.
That's a bridge too far.
I think
So-
this entire conversation, and this goes back to the wanted nature of this. My thinking going through it is the same as a coach. I coach track, I coach basketball. If I have a guy who is a little too aggressive, is too fiery, he's ready for it. He's ready for conflict. He's ready for combat. He's antsy for it. There can be a lot of foolishness in that in a 17-year-old boy. A 17-year-old boy with the potential to become King David. Oh yeah, there's a lot of trouble there, but we can work with that. We can train that. Like you can teach that. When you meet a coward, when you have a boy who struggles with fear,
This one's only driven out through fasting and prayer.
it's like, honestly, that's somebody else's call. That's somebody else's mission, because we can't work with that. We don't have the ability. Only the Holy Spirit can really address that.
Because we're in a position to say, "Whoa," not giddy up.
Yep.
You can steer and tap the brake and work with someone who's got the RPM going. But if we have to go back to square one and build in the motivation, there's no motivation at all. Then that's
trying to add an engine is much harder than changing the brake pads.
right.
I mean, it's just it's so much harder. And so when you're looking for the kind of guy, wanted young men to rebuild Western civilization, willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger when faced with idolatry, like we need that. We want those kind of guys who are ready to go. And I would say guys who are ready to go too soon, like they're too send them. Like send them off to boot camp, send them to bull riding school. They need wisdom. They need to grow. They need to understand when to do it, how to do it. It's not to say that these guys are fantastic at this and that every teenage boy should be flipping off idolatry all the time. But if you find a teenage boy who is, then like we can work with that, because you know what he has is some testosterone. He's got a spine. He's got passion for holiness, and he could be totally foolish in many ways, but we could actually train that. And it's weird to me that pastors, thinkers, publishers, all these people are responding, and the position they're having to maintain is that this one certain thing that is under no circumstances ever should you be willing to flip the bird towards idolatry. Ever. It's like, so you have a bunch of Christians that say, hey, if faced with idolatry, I will under no circumstances ever, I promise, be willing to flip it off. And I just can't imagine putting yourself in that position. Have you ever read the Bible? What would Ezekiel say right now? Like if you brought Ezekiel into modern America, showed him that opening ceremony, showed him the DNC and the child sacrifice at the DNC, showed him the whole tranny movement and everything that's going on, how much would he let it rip?
Jehu, in the book of Kings, desecrates the idols, puts them all in a place, and turns them into a toilet.
Correct.
A toilet.
I want all the people to poop here. Line up.
The thing is, Doug, this is elsewhere. If I remember this correctly, I feel like you've maintained that when you've come to the heart of matter when somebody goes historical grammatical with their exegesis.
Yes.
You know when you're on the actual thing, when they won't tolerate taking it metaphorically, like, no, this is actually,
right.
You've got to the heart of the matter. I think there's something similar here or parallel here where you know when you've come to somebody's true sort of pre-C class, when you find the class that they'll allow this kind of language to.
Yes.
Because there's a forcefulness, there's a colorfulness that is here that makes the point in this really profoundly strong and poignant kind of way that I think that we won't allow our preachers, we won't allow our biblical worldview to have it, but we will still allow it in other areas. So I'm looking, I haven't spent a whole lot of time reviewing the responses, but the ones that I have, I'm looking at guys who I know that actually they defend that language in movies that they watch.
Right.
Because it's gritty, it's real, it's meaningful, it's something like that. And they'll give it there because it's needed to make that moment work.
Right.
but they won't allow it in this circle because I don't think they really want this worldview to actually have that sort of authority in their life.
The Gospel Coalition, for example, has reviewed and commended movies that are full of raunch.
Yeah.
Just
The one I noticed was, so we had quite a bit from Owen Strawn, and then you go and you look and you get along, was it 1917? Beautiful Christological unpacking of the whole thing, 17 F-bombs or 18, I don't know, somewhere in there, and defended. Like, this is, I recommend this. So how do you do that?
And I would add, as you answer, explain why it's not a tuquoquea. Explain why it's not
a what?
A tuquoquea.
Yeah.
Because it's a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah, because tu quoque fallacy is, oh, yeah, well, you do it too.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone says, hey, I saw you shoplifting, it's not a good answer to say, well, you do it too, right? Because shoplifting now is wrong in both cases, right? But if someone is bringing a serious moral charge against you, it's not a tu quoque to say, now, how does your criticism not apply to your own behavior? Right?
Yeah. If your defense is, no, I don't think this is immoral. I think this is a right thing to do.
Right.
And your own actions show that you agree with me.
Right. My metric, so my metric allows what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Your metric wants to disallow what I'm doing while allowing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. That's a different issue.
Tu quoque is also just a fallacy of distraction. It's not a fallacy of structure.
Right.
And when people are dealing with informal fallacies, they don't realize like really what's wrong with it. It's only a problem if you're distracting from the issue. If you're bringing it up to focus on the issue, saying you actually agree with me, apparently.
Yeah.
You know, in other areas of your life, you're actually in agreement with me. What gives?
Side note, there's a guy on Twitter that said, yeah, Canon really missed this. Propriety does matter, and that's why Canon's wrong. And dude had a Martin Luther profile pic. And I said, this must be tongue-in-cheek, given that the guy in the profile pic used to say, I chased the devil away with a fart. The guy rightfully goes, touche. Like it was pretty funny.
There's a lot of people who think this was a Canon press ad because Canon reposted NSA's video and created this whole, a lot of storm.
I blame Canon.
Yeah, it was 100% Canon.
Canon's fault.
Canon would like to take this time to apologize.
Yeah, a lot of people will name their institutions or have Luther quote,
Tombs of the Prophets.
Some of this fastidiousness ought to be directed to the Reformation cartoonists. I saw one with the devil defecating into the Pope's hat. Things like that. Come on, come on. Are you going to let time sanitize this? It's either defensible in the moment or it's not. So we want to be accountable to God. We want to, our words and our ads and everything, we want to be accountable to God. We don't want to be accountable to the traditions of men. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the traditions of men, and we're dealing with it. This circles back to the priestly caste that this is allowed, right? And you unwashed peasants down there, you guys can't do this. And this is a challenging point to thread because you don't ever want to look like you're putting on. I don't want us to look like we're putting on airs here.
Yeah.
But God is doing something marvelous in Moscow. There's something remarkable happening here, and we're having a lot of fun. God is being gracious to us, and that exuberance comes out in things like ads. And a lot of the same thing happened in reaction to Meg Basham's book, Shepherds for Sale. When Shepherds for Sale came out, there were a bunch of people that should have been on her side that weren't suddenly.
All of a sudden.
Why are you attacking?
Whose money did you take?
Either whose money did you take, or this is what I think is actually happening. Years ago, maybe a few decades ago, I defined in North America a broad evangelical is someone who likes Billy Graham. And a broadly reformed person is someone who likes R.C. Sproul. And I wondered back in those days what was going to happen when those two gentlemen went to be with the Lord. Well, what's happened is where we are now is evangelicalism in North America is the ecclesiastical equivalent of Thunderdome, where there's all these factions and territories and ministries, and no one is clearly in charge, right? There's no one clearly in charge. A few years ago, before COVID, the center of gravity was occupied in a gospel coalition kind of way. That was sort of that was the respectable center. They weren't in charge, but they were the main part of downtown.
And Piper hadn't really retired from the field the same way. And,
So, but now, with post-COVID, all the what's called Big Eva and the conference circuit and all that, it's all gone. Okay, and so all we have are, it's like an ecclesiastical Somalia. And what happens is when something happens that starts blessing or benefiting one tribe in it, anybody in the other tribes that doesn't like that tribe getting the
taking a leadership position?
Taking a leadership position, or what might eventually turn out to be a leadership position, that person is against it. So right now, there are people who they know they don't like what Moscow did because it's a successful ad. They wouldn't like it anymore if one of our faculty members had carved a cure for cancer out of a bar of soap and won the Nobel Prize, and we just did a video announcement. They wouldn't like that any more than they like this, right? Because
they didn't like you preaching the gospel on Tucker.
Yeah, they
You know,
just
it's like it's not a like they're gonna find a thing to quibble about.
There's going to be
have
an issue, and that's what happened with Meg Basham's book. Is her thesis was glaringly obvious, made 100 times, and people started niggling. It was either disagreements that were called factual errors. It's just a disagreement, or some little typo type of thing, and people were lining up in accordance with the politics of the thing. So the thing that rank and file Christians out there have to realize is that the evangelical world is political. Okay, it is capital P political to the back teeth. All of this is gamed out, and reactions are gamed out. Opposition is gamed out. Support is gamed out. And so consequently, when we do something like this and all the people take their positions, this is not just happenstance. There's something bigger going on.
And maybe even along those lines, I had one guy say, a friend, and he wasn't upset about it, but he's like, I just figured you guys thought all publicity is good publicity. And I said, well, I just responded, well, something close to that, but we're not Malcolm X in it. We are not by any means necessary. We are not okay with sinning for any kind of publicity. When we do this kind of thing, we don't think we're sinning. You've done this before. You say, I put occasional jalapeno pepper, But when I do, I don't think I'm sinning. It's like I don't say, I think I'm categorically wrong, but I'll do it anyway for the cause. Right. No, we're not doing that. And so let's game that out for a minute. And this is related to my point of, would you kiss your mom with that mouth? Do you salute Jesus with that hand? And we would say, yes. We do.
Lift up holy hands.
We lift up holy hands with the same hand, without flinching, we would say. And Rachel Jankovic has this great line to women where she says, you need to tell your feelings to shut up and salute Jesus. It's like, boom, boom. Right. And the same for the male, this idolatry, give it the bird and salute Jesus. But that point is being contended. So any other rationales and argumentation for, no, this is legitimate use in this context. This is.
I think two things that I see in most of the arguments against it is, first of all, a tendency to go Amelia Bedelia. So a tendency to not understand that this was a picture that was communicating a particular message, rather than, I've had people email me saying, like, you're advocating dry humping your idolatrous things, and it's no, not really. Actually, it's a symbol.
Let me check. Hold on. Nope.
That's not it. So it is going a little bit ridiculous, over literal in the application of it, and not understanding how everybody has understood the finger in popular culture. And then the second thing is, I think a lot of people, what they do is they run ahead and assume what teaching at NSA must be like to students. We're teaching all the freshmen to run around and do obscene gestures at people. and then that being a problem.
I mean, that's an elective.
Yeah, right. You don't have to. It's not required.
Haydn's Creation, Mozart's Requiem, and then Johnny Cash's Middle Finger.
And not understanding, no, this was, as we described earlier, a way of sorting the guys we want to work with and then mature them, grow them up in actual holiness.
So it should be noted, at least at some point in this discussion, is that that photo was taken of Johnny Cash, I believe at San Quentin, when he was asked, can we send a message to the warden?
Yeah.
And so that's when the photo was taken. Then years later, Johnny Cash had a traditionally successful country music career, and then it went into decline. And
Nashville dropped him, turned their back on him.
Nashville sort of shunned him. And Rick Rubin, who was a producer of all kinds of other music, produced Johnny Cash's last 4 albums and did a marvelous job with them. And then Johnny Cash won the Country Music Artist of the Year, something like that, as a result of that. And then Rick Rubin went and took the photo from years before and ran the ad in Billboard magazine. Many thanks to the Nashville establishment. Now, there's 2 things.
Johnny Cash would like to thank the Nashville establishment.
The Nashville Music Establishment. That's where the photo came from, 1998. Well, there's 2 things. I would be willing to grant cheerfully that Johnny Cash was not in a good spiritual place when that photo was taken. Doesn't look to me like he was in a good...
Our ad does not justify the fact that it was his favorite finger.
So basically, however, the object of his ire, the Nashville Music Establishment, is the same kind of establishment that we're up against now. Yeah. Corrupt and leprous and seedy and just diseased. So the American establishment in virtually every sector, and I can't come up with one place in the American establishment that's free of our disease. Yeah. Everything is bad. And that includes the ecclesiastical evangelical establishment.
Yep.
So establishments circle the wagons to protect one another. So even granting Johnny Cash's ire at the Nashville Music Establishment, the establishment today recognizes a natural affinity with the establishment that Johnny Cash was flipping off. Mm-hmm. We have to understand and recognize that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and there are a lot of people in powerful places in America who have let it go to their head and heart, and they just don't want anybody who's willing to stand up to them.
I've enjoyed a few layers of, well, the way marketing works especially, it's like we have people that are following us and paying close attention, haters and supporters, friends, allies. It's like there's a lot of different, affiliate ministers, and so on. There's this immediate reach, and then there's a slightly larger reach. And then when everybody starts getting upset and they start sharing it, we get all the way out to the Lesbiterians and people with pride flags who are mad at us about this ad, which is hilarious. And so we have a number of people who are like, wait, what? What's the don't understand the middle finger thing, but they said skanks. They said cyber skanks. What's with that? Or people pointing out that we put a male minister in our list of manipulative women. Or or people for whom it's a late discovery of like, wait, what's wrong with giggling virgins? At the beginning, like, what's going on here? It's like, well, nothing. What we said is manipulation. We're looking for men who are immune to manipulation, whether from, you can say, good girls, silly good girls, bad girls, Karens, and incidentally, I'm very proud of the plural of Karens is now cauldron. It's a cauldron of Karens. Hang on to that. Or hand-wringing ministers. And so it's, like, here's the list of manipulative women, and that was offensive. But the further out we got, people were finding other things to be like, wah,
sort of like Easter eggs,
and share and go and be upset. And it's interesting. One of the strangest criticisms to me, my favorite, I should maybe say, instead of strangest, is just the delusions of grandeur. Like, who do you guys think you are?
Yeah.
No one gave you permission to save Western civilization. You don't have a permit for that. You've not been awarded any degrees in saving Western civilization.
It's called a Pentecost.
These people, yeah, and the dismissiveness of like, why are people upset? These people are clowns. Like, they're clowns. Ignore them. They're not doing this. This isn't even what they do. Yada yada yada. And I love that. And I want to platform that especially because it's just, yes, please sleep on us. Like, sleep on this, please. Do believe that nothing positive could ever happen for Western civilization or nothing good could come out of Moscow. I mean, because I'm not that old. I'm in my mid-40s, but I was there pretty young when you started the first classical Christian school. It's like NSA was 94. And seeing the impact already of Canon Press's publishing reach, when my first relationship with Canon was Credenda Agenda, the little newsletter, that I was being paid in donuts to fold and stuff into envelopes to go out. I've seen where this began. I've seen where it is.
Right.
I know that our graduates have been in rooms that they have no right to be in. Right. That our graduates are doing things that no one would think that they would be capable of doing. The hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students who have now gone through classical Christian schools because of a roller rink school in Moscow, Idaho. There's one little roller rink school still in that roller rink.
Right.
Not for long, but for now, it is. And there are hundreds and hundreds of schools modeled off of that, teaching their kids, training their kids off a curriculum that came out of Canon Press and Logos School and Moscow. This Western Civ project, this building Western Civ.
So all you woke progressives, go back to sleep.
Go to sleep.
We're just a bunch of bozos.
Yeah, we're idiots. We have delusions of grandeur. We have no idea what we're doing. Meanwhile, if you have any young men who are really handfuls and cannot be tamed by your Sunday school pastor, send them our way.
Yeah, a young man full of testosterone who wants to get away from his lesbian parents.
You can take everything low T and we'll take everything high T and we'll be fine. It'll all work out, I promise.
One thing I would say to people who are listening is that you've got the people who react hard, but for everybody who reacts hard, there's 9 or 10 people who are just watching to see how it plays out.
Yep.
You know,
whether we're sorry.
Yeah. Well, there's the whether you're sorry, or there's always the like, okay, somebody just stepped up and took a swing, and I'm curious to see which way it goes for him.
Yep.
Like he might actually get platformed by this. He might move up, or he might get taken out. And I do think that that's something that's been interesting in Moscow. You've had moment after moment where it's like controversy erupts, and then everybody kind of places their wagers of where I think this is going to go, and then what happens is a couple years later that controversy is over, and everybody kind of ignores their bets and pretends that they didn't make a decision one way or another. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I would say is if you're watching now, don't allow yourself the luxury of not deciding how you feel about this. You know what I mean? Like decide now. Either I am offended and I'm against this, or I actually see the point and I'm willing to get behind that. But I think I'd say make your call, and then let's talk in a couple of years.
There's the one more I could say there. On the last category is people who, like Jared mentioned earlier, who actually just disagree with the tactics. They actually agree with it in principle. Sure, you could use strong language when faced with idolatry, but we think this photo in this ad was a mistake, tactically, this particular thing. And we have everything in common, and we can have a great conversation. It's easy to engage with guys where we share all the same standards, and they say, we agree on the line, and we think you actually crossed the line, and we can have this discussion. There's plenty of people like that, too, who are here, but those guys, I actually think the conversation is short, because if you want to talk about it being a tactical error, the scoreboard is where we look.
Right.
Like, did it work tactically? It worked tactically, even because we're sitting here having a conversation about it. And so then it has to move from tactics to morals of we think that it was immoral. And then there can be moral scruples, but we still share the same standard, and we can still go to the same word and have that argument. And we can actually agree to disagree there, because we're only looking for 75 guys every year. Like we don't need all of them, and we don't need all of them to share the same scruples all the time.
That binary choice is something I've noticed for years and years and years, is that the objections come in two forms. What you're doing is not biblical. And I'd say, okay, let's have a Bible study. But that's if they say it's not biblical, okay, let's to the word, to the law, and to the testimony. What did Elijah do? What did Paul do in Galatians? I wish they'd cut the whole thing off.
Yeah, go ahead and slip, friend.
This is not unbiblical. That's one argument. And then they'll shift. Okay, you've got a lot of verses. You wrote the book, Serrated Edge. There's a bunch of stuff there. Okay, it could be biblical, but you're not Jesus or you're not Ezekiel. I just think what you're doing is counterproductive.
Yeah, unhelpful.
And
not
then
winsome.
That's the
Or
scoreboard.
it's not going to work. Yeah.
That's the scoreboard thing. Say, okay, well, we've not noticed that this is counterproductive because we are advertising for a certain kind of person, and we are in the main pleased with the kind of people we're getting.
And we've successfully spread the word
About
these
our
guys
need for these.
that we want them. And I actually, for example, like Justin Taylor tweeted today a list of things that you should do when faced with an enemy.
Right.
And I like Justin, but I think we're getting subtweeted there. He didn't say anything about us, but I think he's talking to us. And you responded immediately because he left off mocking enemies. And there's a lot of verses for that. Is it possible to be a sweetheart to your enemies and have it be a sin?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It is absolutely possible. Is it possible to mock your enemies and have it be a sin? Yes, it is. Like, you have to actually, in a given situation, in a given moment, you have to find wisdom and faithfulness in what God wants you to do in particular situations. The factory setting for low T evangelicalism, the factory setting is be docile, be a sweetheart, be winsome.
Be so sweet.
Period. Never, ever, ever be Ezekiel. Never, ever, ever be David. Never, ever, ever be Elijah. Never, ever, ever be Paul. Like, those are just out, or Christ. Those are just off the table. Always be docile and be winsome.
Be so sweet that diabetics can't be friends with you.
We're just hoping they stroke. I'm just being so sweet, trying to stroke my enemies. It's been really interesting to kind of watch. I've been busy. I've been on deadline, and so I've had a few people showing me responses, and I've only had a little bit of time to pay much attention to it. But I think I've been very, very grateful that it's gone the way it's gone. I'm grateful that NSA is the kind of college that wants an ad like this, because NSA is the kind of college that wants men like this, and we need them. And 75 guys every year, if we can get there, it's a small lift, but 75 guys who are the kind of guys that we described in this ad, graduating every year, will make an enormous difference. Like, enormous. And so you can sleep on that like it's small potatoes, because on one hand, it is. But on the other hand, I could look at you and what you did, what my grandfather did, your father did, as one guy with some Christian books, what you did starting a school and a roller rink, what the college has done already, in this first window. And it's not hard to do a lot with 5 smooth stones.
And when you apply to NSA and you're thinking, should I put my presidency of the chess club on my resume and application? Or should I put the fact that I was in the rodeo bull riding? Go with the bull riding.
Or rodeo clown. That's
Unless
also
they
totally
were a
acceptable.
ruthless
Rodeo
chess
clowns are the
player
only
that
one.
made other people cry.
Showing no mercy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Related to all this is the call to live the Christian life is manifestly physical, tangible. This fortitude. This has exposed the Gnosticism that we know is present, that I can have some kind of spiritual resistance. I can resist the devil spiritually, but it's not going to require energy. It's not going to require resolve. It's not going to require perseverance. This whole ad has pushed that idea. What we're training guys at NSA constantly for is, this is a hard book. You have to read it. You have to understand it. You're responsible to understand it. You're responsible to be able to stand up in front of people and talk. And then in your life, when you're going to be a dad, you're going to be coming home, you're going to be tired, you have a job to do. You told a hilarious story, Grace Agenda, about your wife coming to you and saying, you're not being any fun right now. I used that just recently because it was just stuck. You're not being any fun. Men know what it's like to be exhausted, and it just kind of be baseline, Hey, we're not coming home and throwing plates. but we're not bringing energy and force, this work of the Spirit in our lives. And that does have to be cultivated. You're not going to get that if you're not aiming at it. This ad aims at it. So as we wrap up, this has been a very good conversation about the ad. A pitch to all those guys out there. This is a place where you can be a man and grow in what it's like being a man. We're not a perfect place, but you have men here who are actually engaged, not just trying to train you how to shoot and how to fight, but actually shooting themselves and fighting themselves, repenting of sin, confessing sin, moving on. This is manifestly us not apologizing. So you got that message. And I'm sure there'll be another NSA ad in the chamber that will be fired soon. We can come back and have another conversation. So thanks, guys.
For now, I would just encourage everybody, just lean on the baby bird, which is, I think, just use the pinky. You show people the pinky.
It's a pinky time.
You you're leaning in. It's like, what am I doing here? Because people see that and they assume it's offensive, but they have no idea what it means.
You just warm up with the pinky.
It's like, what? Like, just when you see idolatry, just ease in, put a toe in the water.
Nice. All right, thanks.